We would like to encourage all our listeners, when in Leadville, make a point to get by Floyd's of Leadville, their house, that is. You can't miss it. If you're rolling into town from the north side, it's right there on the 24 at 11th Street, across from the Family Dollar store, where I've been, in fact. There's good stuff in Family Dollar, but better stuff in Floyd's of Leadville. It's a big white house with a Floyd's of Leadville sign out front.
Yeah, now if you look up Floyd's of Leadville on Google Maps, you might get directed to a store closer to downtown, right by the Periodic Brewery, which is also a great place to go visit while you're in Leadville. But that is the cannabis shop, and visiting there is a personal decision you can make, on your own time. That is not part of the podcast. Anyway, we're saying go to the house, the house close to the Safeway, and that is where you're going to find all the CBD products we talk about on this show. And there's a pretty good chance that while you were there, you're going to meet the man himself, Floyd Landis.
And while the company is called Floyd's of Leadville, it is not Floyd from Leadville. It is actually Floyd from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So when he had a chance to grow his business, where do you suppose he expanded to? That's right, his hometown of Lancaster.
Yeah, for our listeners, say east of the Mississippi, if you ever want to go check out a Floyd's retail, head to a shop in Lancaster. It's a little different in that it's more of a cafe. And in fact, Floyd has a CBD-infused coffee available at that cafe or to order. It is called Stage 17 Dark Roast with 15 milligrams of CBD isolate per 2 tablespoons of ground coffee. A little bit of something to mellow you out while you're being picked up.
Right. It has sucked not being able to go to our favorite in-ride coffee stops these days, but we will again someday. And when that day comes, keep Floyd's in mind. Be sure to check out Floyd's of Leadville, our presenting sponsor, for 2 seasons in a row now at floydsofleadville.com, and use the code FATTY at checkout for a 15% discount on all your orders.
And thanks, Floyd's of Leadville, for sponsoring the show.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race presented by Floyd's of Leadville. This is Season 3, Episode 6 of the show that breaks down, builds you up, gets you ready, and freaks you out for the highest and hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country. I'm Michael Houghton, Hottie for short.
And I'm Eldon Nelson, better known as Fatty. Jonathan Lee of Trainer Road is back in this episode to finish up his 2019 Leadville Trail 100. Last episode, we left Jonathan as he was making his way down Pipeline inbound. We're going to see how he fared over the Powerline climb and up the Boulevard section.
Yeah, very important part, the most important part of the race, we would argue here. But before we get to Jonathan's race day, let's get to our question of the week. We've been really enjoying these, and this one I snagged from the Leadville participants page. I saw Justin Kazana asking there, what indoor training program was preferred by Leadville racers? Trainer Road got a lot of love, as did Training Peaks and Zwift and Sufferfest. There are many folks who just comboed up with subscriptions to both, a program like Trainer Road, which is more coaching focused, and then they would have also a subscription to Zwift, which is more focused on riding courses. When it comes to riding courses, it's pretty hard to find anything that can replicate the off-road world, and even harder to find a Leadville virtual ride, but there are a couple options out there. Now, Fatty, you're a Trainer Road guy, right? That's been your go-to.
Yeah, I have been a avid Trainer Road subscriber for, I think, 5 years now. I mean, a really long time. I've also intermittently tried out Zwift, loved it, had fun with it, fun game. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way at all. I've also done, bought and used a lot of Sufferfest in my time. And honestly, I guess I'm kind of the opinion, use them all, have fun.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people out there doing that. But I think one of the goals I was picking up on while on the participants page is people were wanting not only to train, but also to get familiar with the course. And I was started thinking, well, how could that get done? And I came up with a couple ideas, and this is going to be an ongoing thing for, I think, us here at Fatty. I think we're going to be exploring this further down the road, but I have a couple of examples here that might work for folks that we've tried out over the last few days. One is just to take a Garmin file and run it as a course while you ride your trainer. I've done this.
Huh.
I rode from the start at 6th and Harrison to the top of the Sugarloaf with my Garmin using a Leadville course file to control the resistance on my kicker. Now, for visuals, not a lot there, but I did swipe my screen on my Garmin, my 1030, back and forth, looking at the map, the course profile, and the current climb I was on to get an idea of where I was and what was coming up next. I'll say this certainly helped that I knew, or using this method, it certainly helped that I knew the course so well. In fact, I knew the section, that section of the course so well that I could actually imagine in my head, what was going on as I was doing that. I could imagine that, that hard left-hander on the St. Kevin's climb near the top. But as far as replicating the effort required, I thought this method fell short. I mean, first, there's no way to replicate the altitude of Leadville. That's pretty difficult to do for anywhere other than being at 10,000 feet.
Or descending down power line.
Yeah, I mean, how are you going to, right? The descents certainly are very difficult to replicate. The climbs sort of come across. And while the Garmin certainly knows the slope of the Sugarloaf climb, it cannot replicate the traction difficulties, the sudden change in efforts that occur when you're headed to the power line outbound section. And of course, this would be the case, I think, Fatty, for any stationary replication of the Leadville course. Still, I think running your Garmin, having to control your trainer while having the Leadville course on is a great way to challenge yourself by doing sections throughout your training year or training preparation and see if you can improve on those sections as you move along.
Yeah.
The other method I tried was Rouvy. Now, Rouvy is kind of a Zwift competitor, kind of melds some elements of something like a TrainerRoad and the experience of a Zwift into one. You ride, there are visuals, and the program controls your trainer. Now, the cool thing about Rouvy, I'll have to say, is that it uses video from real roads and trails in some cases. Included in their video lineup are a couple sections from the Leadville course. Now, Rouvy's best video courses are what's called AR course. They have this AR rating, which allows users to ride with and see other riders, including themselves, as avatars. So they take the real world and put a virtual world over that real world. Unfortunately, the Leadville course on Rouvy is not AR. It is simply a video from a Leadville racer's GoPro on race day. So it's really just you riding along with that video, and then the video kind of takes you out to Carter 8, and that's where it ends. That's about all you have for honest-to-goodness video on Rouvy, which is too bad, but I kind of get it too. It probably takes quite a bit to make these complex AR-type videos. And I thought I was just over at that point with Rouvy, but then a listener contacted me, Steve Alexander, and he pointed out to me that there is another option with Rouvy. There are courses on Rouvy that do not have video, but instead use kind of this Google Earth experience. And Steve himself has created several of these courses, and they're up on Rouvy now if you want to check them out. Rouvy controls your trainer, and a Google Earth view shows you where you are on the course. So say as you ride up St. Kevin's, an icon shows you where you are on that part of the course, and then the app dishes out the resistance as you climb up its slopes.
Oh, I like it.
I thought this option of all of them that I tried, the Garmin, the Rouvy video, I thought this option was the best of the three. You ride, you pick up on all the turns, some of the features on the course, albeit from above, and then the effort changes as you make your way along the Leadville course. And there's a lot of these map-style courses to choose from. There's full length. You can do the whole Leadville 100 if you want. It's broken down into sections. In fact, Steve has made 3 or 4 sections using the stage race, and he's broken it down that way. Today, for instance, I rode from Twin Lakes Alternate back to Pipeline. A lot of fun. It was good. So I think that's worth something checking out. Rouvy, that is nicely priced too. So if you've got TrainerRoad and you're like, it's $10 a month, so not bad, and you get some visual assistance here. In fact, they have a 2-week free trial period too, which is pretty cool too. So if you just want to kind of go there, check out the Leadville courses and get the hell out, that's too. What makes sense, and what a lot of people like Steve do though, is again combo it up. TrainerRoad as your primary training piece, and then use something like Rouvy to help you recon the Leadville course. So again, thanks to Steve Alexander for helping me research this topic. And if there are any other ideas out there on how to virtually recon the Leadville course or any course, we would love to hear about them, because I think what Leadville racers, Fatty, and a lot of endurance riders getting ready for an event where the course is new or long or both, is what they want to be fit, obviously, but they also want to know the course, right? The fit thing is easily solved with a program like TrainerRoad. The harder part, though, is getting to know 103 miles of terrain.
Yeah, and having done the race so many times, the visualization part is very easy for me. I mean, I could run a mental reel of all 103 miles. I'm not kidding. But it is really helpful for folks who have not, just visualization for your legs to kind of get a sense of, oh, so this is how hard, minus the altitude, of course, if it will feel as I'm going up St. Kevin's, or as you are, doing the various parts of the race. So yeah, I really like that. I have not tried Ruby out. I'm going to have to try it out. I'm kind of, like I said at the beginning of this little conversation, I'm very much of the more the merrier camp for apps you use for training. And kind of like I am with bikes in the real world, right? I love mountain biking. I am kind of interested in gravel. I love road. I've even done track. But the more you do, basically, the less likely you are to get burned out. Variety is hugely important. That said, I still mostly use TrainerRoad when I'm riding inside. So anyway, I want to remind our listeners before we get to back to the interview with Jonathan is, if they're going to pick themselves up a Leadville kit, jersey, bib, socks, whatever, or, just get a t-shirt, you need to do that before May 1st, because that is when we are closing the pre-order. And we want to make sure that we get all of the kits in your hands before Leadville 100 itself. And you can find the pre-order form at bit.ly/Leadville Kit. It's all one word there. Everything you need to show off to the world that you love this race and, the podcast, it's all right there. Jersey, t-shirts, shorts, socks.
And I will add, it's a nice way to show a couple of podcasters some love, too. Check it out. Buy something now before the pre-order ends at bit.ly/, that is Leadville Kit. And again, thanks to DNA Cycling for designing, producing, and shipping the kit, as well as sponsoring the show. Find them at dnacycling.cc. Now, as promised, it's part 2 of Jonathan Lee of TrainerRoad's and his 2019 Leadville Trail 100. We left him off Pipeline inbound, where suddenly there is trouble on the horizon. The halfway point was 4 hours, 11 minutes. Excellent time. And then you took 32 minutes to get to the mat at Twin Lakes inbound. Again, you're hauling there. But an hour between Twin Lakes and the pipeline feed for a guy like you would be something on the slower side, actually. Most people are doing that easily the 45-minute range, 50-minute range, somewhere in there. So clearly that was an area where and maybe some delirium set in.
And maybe that's where you took your 8.5-minute break.
I didn't, but that's where it started to absolutely affect me. So my stomach started to really hurt. And the night prior, so I know that people are going to say this sounds crazy. I'm sorry, but so the night before, almost always before every race, I usually get pad thai. And that's a great meal. I don't get anything crazy spicy, but this isn't something where like I'm experimenting the night before. And I know somebody's thinking of this and listening to this and just thinking this guy's insane. He sabotaged himself. But we actually stayed down in Denver for this one. We didn't stay up in Leadville. And we just drove up the morning of, which with the support crew was great. I got in a quick nap in the car beforehand, and it worked out well. And I'd actually been to this Thai restaurant before in Denver multiple times, so I knew that it wasn't a bad thing. But on this day, I think it was, because things started to not feel good in my gut pretty early on, actually. I started to think like, oh, maybe it's because I'm fueling too much. But then I had to remind myself, no, you take in this even higher than this all the time. It started to hurt a little bit, definitely more on Columbine. And then through this section, it really started to hurt. And it's funny because if you look at it, yes, it was probably affecting my body's ability to absorb and process the glycogen that it needed. But at the same time, I can't help but think I was probably capable of putting out more power, but just the discomfort was enough to distract my mind mentally. And that's something that's really important to remember. Like, you can really get distracted with anything small. And if you're not focusing on the task at hand, it's hard to keep your performance up. And that was hard for me, really hard. So it all came to a head when we were going back up power line. And I was almost to the top of power line, which we can talk about that one more. But which, by the way, at that point, I actually took a hydration pack, and I was planning on dropping that hydration pack at the base of power line, which I ended up doing. And I dropped it with a friend of mine who was there, which was very handy to have. So I dropped it there, but they were handing out these yellow cold towels on power line. I don't know if you saw those, Elton.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember who it was who was doing that. It was someone with one of the sponsors. But yeah, people handing out wet towels would have been really nice if the day had been super hot. As it was, I didn't really feel like I needed it. But it sounds like you needed it for a different reason.
Yeah, so I like saw like towels, and I was like, yes, please. And I took one, and then I saw another one. I was like, yes, please. And I had like 6 towels on me because I was like, the way my stomach is feeling right now, I might have to use these. And sure enough, I ended up having to pull over. I hopped off the edge of the trail and got to a spot where I could kind of hide. And I went through what I had to go through. And thank you so much for bringing those towels, even on a not hot day. And then I was able to get going again. Man, I felt so much better afterward. It's a bummer that happened, because I think I would have been I think that just without that affecting my gut, then when you remove the stoppage time and everything else, it probably would have been a sub-8, which would have been pretty cool. But that's all part of the game with the race.
Yep, it is. We all have the time that we have in the end. And yeah, I keep wanting to mentally subtract my own stop time. And it's like, nope, you don't get to do that. Unfortunately, you can't email Lifetime Fitness and say, hey guys.
Yeah, you got to understand. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. But that was the hardest climb I've ever done. And I think it would have been the hardest climb I've ever done, even if my gut wasn't in pieces.
So why is that? I mean, the hardest climb you've ever done, that is a bold thing to say.
Yeah. So, I mean, probably Mount Ikea was probably harder because of the conditions that we climbed that one in. It was snowing and stuff in Hawaii, which was crazy. But it's so steep. And I feel like you've done everything leading up to this that just basically brings you down to kind of being a shell of a human. Like, you don't have a whole lot of yourself left by this time. And then the climb is just so steep, and it was graded. So it was probably even easier for us this year. But man, it was the steepness. I was I had a 32 tooth chainring, and I had Eagle on there. So it was 1050. And I was in that 50 the whole time, and I was barely turning my pedals over. It was just so steep. And at that point, everything you've done, it's just brutal. I can't imagine that on a hot year too. That would have just been, because we really lucked out. It was not hot. It was nice and cool throughout that whole climb. But, I'm looking at my cadence right now, and it was just hovering around 50 RPM. At points, it was dropping even lower. And, the power itself through that whole section was still on par with my pacing, but I promise you, I couldn't have gone any harder. Like, it's just, I was doing everything I could to stay up. It's so hard.
It's where it comes. I mean, I tell people all the time, and they kind of look at me kind of weird. I go, I've climbed Mount Ventoux before, and I didn't find it to be that hard. Why was it hard? Because it was the only thing I did. I literally rode to the bottom of the mountain, did the 2.5 hour climb or whatever it was, and rode back down. It was the only thing I did that day. Much harder is the power line climb. Why? Because it comes at mile 80. That's why. If you were to just ride to the bottom of the power line and do that, it'd be hard. Yeah, but it's all in context with that thing.
Yeah. I talked my way riding up that for the podcast once, right? Talked the whole way up. But that was all I'd done that day.
Yep, exactly. It's hard. And I remember even going through there were so many, which this just goes for the whole race. Thank you so much to everybody that, listeners to this podcast and Trainer Road athletes and everything else. It was so cool to meet all of you. And in this section, it was great because whether it was families or other athletes, they were there, and there was a lot of support on the climb when I was going through there. And it was just so great to have that sort of encouragement. It really helped because I was a basket case at that point and, just barely getting held together. And I did have to, at one point, I slipped and then grabbed traction, but it required such strength and contraction in the body that I was afraid that things were going to happen that would be unfavorable considering the state of my stomach. So I unclipped and had to take like a 5-second sanity check breather and then, take a few steps and then get back on. But man, that climb is hard, really hard, but it's still not done, with all of that said, it's not over yet.
Yeah, and Fatty, it's got, like Jonathan said, kind of that Groundhog Day effect too. Just like the pipeline section coming back, that climb at the top, you swear you're at the top like 5 times. Isn't the crest right here? And no, yet again, you turn another corner, you're like, more of this? Jeez, what the hell? Oh. And then, of course, you get over the top, Jonathan, and it's downhill time. But by now, you're pretty fatigued, and we talked about kicking off this episode, weightlifting and being strong enough. To me, this is where it comes into play. I mean, to me, when you're headed down Sugarloaf, especially that lower section where you got all those stones, those half-buried stones, I mean, this is where you really need to be strong. How did your day go there?
Yeah, I was actually pretty worried about pinch flatting there, right? That was the only spot where I was worried about it. Sure, I got tacks like everybody else earlier on, but sealant took care of those. But I was worried about pinch flatting because, like you said, Michael, it's like the rocks are pretty substantial. And when you're going that fast and then you're not paying, and you're really tired and fatigued, it's so easy to get out of line and then, hit a bad rock. So I went through that section. Once again, having a full suspension bike was so helpful. And I went through that and I stopped, looked around because it was beautiful once again. And then I reminded myself, I was like, this is going to be fun because you're going to get to pick line choices and get your speed up, and you love descending, right? And if I look at that section, man, I did hardly any pedaling through that whole descent. And I'm glad I did because it made the rest of the race much more enjoyable. And I really just tried to pick my lines. And I was very careful about how I picked my lines. I kept my dropper pose down all the time. I did a lot of dropper sitting too, which for people that don't know, the dropper sitting is the most glorious experience of your life. When you can just drop that seat post and then just sit low. It was so comfortable because it was a different position than what I had been having the rest of the day. And once we got through that, and once again, making sure that I was careful about my lines and everything else. It's hard, but you have to remind yourself there's still quite a lot more race left. At that point, once I got to the bottom of that descent, man, I still had basically an hour and 6 minutes left of the race that I still had to do, which is a daunting thing after you've done all of that. It's pretty tough.
And
sure.
Yeah, including a significant climb, right? It's that
Yes.
paved climb up to the TrainerRoad's station. That go pretty well for you? Were you cramping? Were you experiencing any of the craziness that comes from, you're 85 miles into a race and you get a nice little rest and recovery, and then suddenly it is full gas again? Because that gets me every time. Yeah,
man. So it was like, this was the spot where we actually had like a team, like a group of people that we all kind of came together, and it was just what we needed. And we all kind of had the same pace, and it was awesome. I loved that. So that was like a really cool experience. I was riding with the folks from Pedal Industries and a couple other companies and stuff, and they were all really nice, and we're all kind of evenly paced. And we were keeping each other in check going up that climb. It was like, all right, hey, this is a little hard for me. And then when somebody would say that, we'd all go, you know what? It's probably too hard for me too, even though I'm probably not feeling it yet. So we kept a pretty even pace going up that climb and kind of stayed within ourselves. I'm looking at it, and I had like a really tight correlation between, this is kind of nerdy stuff, but my normalized and average power, the difference between it. So I had an average power of 198 watts and a normalized power of 200 watts. So only 2 watts difference for that climb. And I just stayed really steady and tried to not light any sort of fireworks going through that section. It actually wasn't too bad. But once again, in the heat, that would be a big concern. And actually, I would love to see Leadville. It would be tough logistically, but to have a more substantial aid station or allow people back in before that climb. Because once people really get that deep into the race, that's when the nutrition choices get extremely important and crucial, right? It's not just like to have a good race, but it's also, just health in general. It'd be awesome to see some sort of aid station inclusion in that section that's a little bit more built out, something like Twin Lakes or something like that, if it's logistically possible. Because it's a pretty long ways from basically, pipeline all the way back. So,
well, you are allowed, folks, to go to Carter Aid. It's a volunteer aid station, but I have driven there myself before. I met Fatty and another racer there one year. So they do allow you to drive and park there. Just not many people do it because by the time they send their racer off either from Twin Lakes or a pipeline, most folks just head back to the finish line to wait them because the risk you run if you try to meet a racer at Carter Aid is you're probably not going to see them at the finish. It gets very difficult to catch back up. If you go back, if you can't find a place to park, catching up with somebody then gets to be a little bit difficult. But still, you're making good time here, Jonathan. I mean, you went power line to Carter Aid in about an hour 20, which is good. That's good pacing. You're moving up at this point. How are you feeling once you get through Carter Aid? And again, this next little section is kind of tough. People don't really realize it's a little bit of a kick in the butt to get up and over Kevens.
Yeah. Once we kind of got over like coming into Kevens, there are some steep sections too, right? That's something that on the dirt when you're coming up to the top of Kevens like that, it's pretty steep and it's enough to definitely, if you're on your limit, it's going to hurt you quite a lot. But I tried to stay within myself through that section. And then once we got into those descents, I was like, oh man, we're almost there. And just like morale was high and I was loving it. It was a ton of fun. I actually, at that point, even I took in one of their caffeinated gels at that point too. And so caffeine was high, like everything was just great. And when I went through that section, I was even finding spots like kind of like jumping on the edge of the trail and stuff and finding little fun things. I was falling in love with riding my bike again, basically. And then at that point, our group disbanded and then we ended up kind of coming back together with a different group. And I feel like that last section was pretty strong for me because of how I paced. And also because of the nutrition plan, I just didn't really feel flat. So the only thing that came to a surprise to me coming in was I don't know why, because I knew that it took a different route coming back into town, but I just had no clue how long that last climb would be coming in. And it was mentally challenging. That was hard.
Yeah. Boulevard, the bottom of Boulevard to the finish line is about 5 miles.
Yes.
And it is a punch in the gut.
Oh, it's so hard. And at one point you parallel some railroad tracks before you get to basically that climb. I remember, yes. And I was like, oh, cool. Railroad tracks are flat. We're going to follow these coming into town. Like this is, and they did not. We turned away and it got steep and then it just kept on dragging all the way up. It was really cool though, because I had an experience in that section where there's some Trainer Road athletes, some subscribers that were around me and they said, I'm really close to beating my goal. And my goal is to go, sub 8:15 or sub 8:30. And it was really fun and motivating to work with them and to be like, it's always funny how that, those stressful and tough situations at the end of the race, it's like a band of brothers that you form, brothers and sisters that you form at the end there. And you are, you could have been friends your whole entire life or just met. It doesn't matter. Everybody at that point is just like, you're the closest of friends. So that was really fun. And even if you look at like the finish line pictures that I think I was bib 1660. And if you look at those, you can see there were a handful of people that were right there with me coming across the finish line. And it was so cool to finish with them. And man, yeah, what a high coming into that finish line too. It was just a huge day, and what an accomplishment for anybody that finishes that race or has the courage to take it on. Even it's impressive.
Yeah, it's an emotional moment to cross that finish line, isn't it? And your time, just because I'm sure everyone always wants to know what the time is. Your time was 8 hours, 14 minutes, and 9 seconds. So a very, and I'm not going to say respectable, I'm going to say a very admirable time, although I've been faster.
Yeah, you have.
Had to get that in.
And in fact, yes, you passed me at the Twin Lakes going out at the Twin Lakes aid station, or like right after it. And when you passed me, you had the most perplexed look on your face. It was like it made me like question. I was like, do I have something on my face? And then at some point, I think at an aid station, we ended up crossing back, but I thought you were well ahead of me. And in my mind, I was like, this is Eldon's house and you're a guest. Like Leadville is his domain. So yeah. And Nate, our CEO at Trainer Road, for those that listen to our podcast and all that stuff, the friendly banter that we always have, he was very upset at me that I didn't push harder, in his words, because I ended up, my intensity factor, which is basically what percentage of FTP you rode for the whole day, it ended up being 83% of my threshold. So that's relatively high. But I definitely, yes, if I was really going for it and I didn't care if I liked my bike or not at the end of that race or anything like I said in the beginning, yeah, sure. I'm sure I could have shaved more time, but that was a hard-earned 8 hours and 14 minutes. Like, I don't care what time you cross that finish line, it's hard, and it's well-earned.
In Los Angeles, we have been encouraged to reduce our trips to grocery stores. And it does make sense these days. Grocery stores are a place where a lot of people and their germs converge. So reducing those trips in times like these certainly is smart. Of course, it means you either have to be more efficient with each trip or get creative to get some of your supplies.
Yeah, and that's where the feed can help, especially for breakfast items. If you go to their website and click on the nutrition menu, go down to the breakfast section, you'll find a few nice staples for that first meal of the day. You can stock up on oatmeal, nut butters, pancake mix, and even coffee.
And while you're there, grab some bars, jerky, and protein powder. All good stuff to have around just in case your fresh goods start running low. And while you're at it, check out the BLDG Active Antimicrobial Spray. We're all being told these days to keep our face and hands clean, and doctors say soap and water is still the best, but having portable sanitizer with you is the next best thing. BLDG is safe for both hands and face. In fact, they say to spray it directly on your face. No stinging there at all.
No.
Or your phone, for that matter, anywhere where germs might collect, or maybe your grips on your bike, or anywhere you might think you need to clean something off real quick. Not a bad idea to have that BLDG spray handy to do that. The $30 price tag, yeah, a little shocking, but it should last you about 3 months. The feed takes care of the rest when you order something from them, most notably getting it to you so you don't have to be in a store.
Yeah, that really is nice. And the feed is back as a sponsor for our season 3 here, obviously. They've got all the stuff that Hadi just mentioned here, including coffee. Code is the same, thefeed.com/Leadville. The deal has changed. Instead of just a box of stuff that I like, you can get 15% off anything that you like. So get the 15% discount at thefeed.com/Leadville. Get that 15% discount. Now let's get back to the finish line with TrainerRoad's Jonathan Lee.
You did a negative split, and also your time from pipeline inbound, respectable 2 hours, 7 minutes. I mean, that's awesome moving. That's where the race is. The last 2 hours is the whole race just comes down to that. So excellent job there. So how was it? How was your experience different from what you expected, both from just the race atmosphere and the course and the metrics, the data you learned?
Yeah, so the atmosphere I picked up from crewing was extremely supportive and powerful. Like, it was so cool to sit there next to people, and I was just getting excited when I was crewing the year before, just seeing people come in and seeing like the excitement surrounding them. It was really cool. And then when I raced that race, that energy was maintained. Like, anytime I was around another person, it was impressive. So I haven't participated in a race that's that supportive and feels like that, like communal, I guess. I've done some really big and long, road races and stuff like that, but I've never participated in anything that was that supportive. That was really cool. It was mentally way harder than I anticipated. It's just a hard 100 miles. And I think a lot of that is because of the way the course is laid out. when you're coming back and you've done all these things, it's somehow different than when you were going out on it. And it makes it just, it mentally feels very hard. So I wasn't expecting it to be that tough. The other thing that I wasn't expecting as well was it to start as hard as it did. And man, I could see how it could put everybody in a spot of bother if you go out too hard. But it was like at the end of it, I was like, because this definitely isn't, like you mentioned earlier, Michael, my wheelhouse. But man, it was a really cool experience. And one of the races, one of the finishes I'm more proud of because I feel like I did a good job of managing it. And it was such a hard thing once again. So such a cool race. And, just like any big event, yes, I respect, anybody that finishes it. And, but this event is something special. It's unique and challenging.
Did you learn anything from your data points in the end?
Yeah. So, I learned that if you basically on pacing, I think that it's most like it's best if people shoot for a 0.75 IF, which is basically 75% of their threshold. If they shoot for that to be basically what their normalized power is by the end of the race, somewhere around there, I think they're going to have a great day. And that's something that I think power is really helpful for this. You do have to keep in mind the fact that when you go up in elevation, it drops down, and you can actually Google that. There are like charts that basically estimate roughly for how much, it goes down. Once again, I was somewhere probably around 305 watts at 5,000 feet where we're at here in Reno. It's probably somewhere around 270 up at that elevation for the race. But with that calculated, I figured, that's where I needed to be. And yeah, I think that pacing by power is huge. The last thing that I would say too is just do not underestimate the fact that how much you have left whenever you're going up something that's hard. Just remember that you don't have to push as hard as you want up it. Stay even, stay conservative. It's going to pay off at the end.
Good advice.
Yeah. Know how hard is what you want to know. Did you pay attention to heart rate at all? We didn't bring up heart rate. Do you look at a heart rate?
No, in fact, I removed it as a data field because for a couple of reasons. So first of all, if my heart rate monitor gets the jersey starts flapping on it, or it gets a little dry, or it's not doing something right, and it says that I'm, at 280 beats per minute and I'm up at 13,000 feet, I'm going to call an ambulance, and so I don't want bad data freaking me out in that regard. But then also everybody's heart rate does very strange things on race day, period. Then when you add on the elevation that you're at, and then when you add on the length of the race that you're at and how many opportunities you have to have varying levels of hydration and nutrition throughout that. And then if you're taking in caffeine, all that stuff, I didn't. So the main thing is, if you know your abilities with power, you know what you can do, right? And power is an objective measure of work that you're doing. So rather than looking at something subjective that's showing effort, I'd rather err on the side of caution with an objective measure of the work that I'm doing, because I know that's something that actually is showing what I'm doing and what I can do. So yeah, I actually took it off my watch there. I took off the heart rate field, so I didn't see it for the day. It still tracked it, and it's all over the place. When I'm looking at it now, it looks like an earthquake. But
collect the data, look at it later. So if you were going to do one or two things differently, what would they be?
Yeah, great question. I would have somebody at the base of pipeline so that I could take a quick break there before I go up that. I'd probably actually move them from...
Do you mean at the base of power line?
From pipeline. Forgive me. Yeah, power line. So I would move them from the pipeline aid station to power line, to the base of it. There were a lot of folks there. I don't know if that's an official aid station, but there were a ton of people there.
Yeah, that's the deal. You're not technically not allowed to have somebody there. You can have somebody at Carter Aid, like I said earlier, but technically the race would frown on that.
Yeah. So I guess I probably shouldn't give that advice, but I was shocked at the race with how many people were at the base of it. It was packed full of people. So I feel like that would be definitely helpful, and that would have helped. Or, like you said, having somebody at Carter Aid. Sure, they would have missed me at the finish line, but that's okay.
You'll wait for him to show.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going anywhere. Trust me. I just want to lay down. But then the other thing, I guess, that I would do differently, I think that I would go through with a pacing plan. I would have probably gone more conservative in the beginning, even more conservative. So I would have capped myself, done a much better job at like hard capping at 240. And anything above that, I would have just put a hard stop on, basically. Because I bet that ended up taking, dropping the performance potential that I had, dropping it by, even if it's 0.5%, when you're talking about a 4-hour ride or 4 hours, halfway through the race, that's a significant chunk of time, if it's just even 0.5%. So, would have just paced more conservatively. But I feel like I nailed the nutrition. I feel like I nailed on the equipment side of things. I feel like that went well. I would tell my pit crew which one is the Google Maps pin and which one is the Google Maps route. That would have helped. So, yeah, I think that's it. It would be fun to do it with a friend too. That would be like, just have some more commiseration, I guess. It was pretty lonely on that pipeline section. All right. So
build up a single speed. Come ride it with me.
Yeah, that would be fun to ride with you. Not single speed. I'll have gears, but I'll ride with you.
Deal. I will suck your wheel the whole day.
Yeah. Well, Fatty, I think there's no doubt we're talking to a sub-8 guy here. I think it's just a couple of things here and there, and he's sub-8. Well, not easily. I mean, I think it's, you get in there at 750-ish, somewhere in there, Jonathan. I think it's well within your reach. Right. The unforced error notwithstanding with the pad tie, but
sure. Yeah.
I think it's well within your grasp. It sounds like.
Yeah. It's like, it's funny. I'd like to think I'm one and done with Leadville in terms of racing it because it's so far out of my wheelhouse. Man, if my son said he wanted to race Leadville, well, I'm right in then. That's for darn sure. But
that's a few years away.
We got some time yet. But if it's, the right combination of friends or anything else like that, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think, look, like you said, Michael, nothing is easy on that day, but I think that absolutely, getting, even pushing down low into 7s would be something pretty cool to do at some point. And maybe as I get older here, I'm going to enjoy longer races more than the short ones as kids beat me more and more. So we'll see. Might happen.
Well, Jonathan, it has been such a pleasure hearing your story as well as your insights for this race. I've learned some stuff that I'm going to take into consideration for my 2020, 2021 and beyond.
Awesome. I'm hoping that I'll be there, at least to be crewing for friends and stuff like that. I want to be there. So it'll be good to see you all.
If you want more of Jonathan Lee's insights on Leadville and training, go to TrainerRoad.com. He is also part of their podcast, Ask a Cycling Coach, where you can get great tips on training for an event like Leadville. Fatty and I find them especially useful for the athlete who is time crunched and needs to make the most out of every pedal revolution.
Yeah, and I want to talk about Shimano for just a second here. I have told my listeners many times, my plan is I'm going to single speed this year. It's a harder day in the saddle, but the bike is a lot easier to build with much less that can go wrong. Now, Shimano does nothing specific for single speed, but a lot of their XTR parts will be my go-to anyways. Brakes, definitely. I need those and definitely will be XTR. Drivetrain, well, I won't be needing as many parts, but XTR is still going to be my choice for the chain, the crankset, and of course the pedals. And since, all single speeds are simple, but the truth is not all of them are sophisticated and elegant. And that's where Shimano comes in. Whether you are shifting or not, there is nothing, honestly, nothing better than XTR.
Yeah, Fatty, that XTR crankset in particular is pretty magical, especially for single speeders. I know there's a lot of focus for you folks on that rear cog, but getting your gear inches right also means matching the correct front ring. And that's where that XTR crankset comes in handy. I mean, ring removal and replacement is a snap because Shimano has taken their center lock rotor mounting idea and applied it to the chain ring. With the cranks removed, you simply use the supplied socket to remove the lock ring and slide off the chain ring. No more fiddling with chain ring bolts, which is such a hassle and can be a total pain. And you might even drop one on the garage floor, or have what happened to me once is have one seize up and you end up taking a drill out and drilling it out. So Shimano has really fixed a lot of those hassles.
Oh, yeah. We love Shimano. And whether I go with single speed or not, you can bet that I will have an XTR crank set on my Leadville race bike. Go to bike.shimano.com for more. We are going to have a link in the show notes for this episode at Leadville100podcast.com. We started the show off with a question about indoor training programs, and we know that a lot of you have been separated from your trails and roads due to the stay-at-home orders. Well, we wanted to take a moment now to spotlight someone who has really taken the riding at home idea to a whole new level.
Yeah, that is former pro Molly Weaver. Now, she was training for and looking forward to the Dirty Reaver 130 gravel event in Northumberland, England. Like a lot of things, the event was canceled due to COVID-19, but that didn't stop Molly. She regrouped and set up her own course in her parents' backyard and called her event the Dirty Weaver. It was a Dirty Reaver she was supposed to be in, and now she had the Dirty Weaver. Molly made a 100-meter loop that included a dirt walkway, grass, and part of a patio. She even set up course markers and signage. For more than 12 hours, Fatty, on a recent Saturday, she did laps in her parents' backyard, completing a little more than 1,300 laps. So about 80 miles. Average speed, just under 7 miles per hour.
Oh, that is my favorite kind of crazy, Audie. And I was watching a bunch of the videos she posted, and in all of them, she looks pretty muddy, like it had been raining for part of the day.
Yeah, at one point she stopped and washed down her bike, but kept going for 1,300 laps. Incredible. Molly's ride was also for a good cause. She raised almost $15,000 for Women's Aid, a charity that works to end domestic abuse. And one other note on Molly. 3 years ago, when she was a pro, she was hit by a car and nearly died, but she emerged with a ton of perspective.
Avoiding death is, it's like a double-edged knife kind of thing. It's one of this, on one hand, there was this sort of elation when I first came out of hospital. I actually called my mum after my first ride, and I said, this is absolutely amazing. I'm never going to be unhappy again, because this is just, everything's beautiful. I thought I'd never see it again, and I could have died. And then actually, it suddenly changes to this awareness of your own mortality. And this is a bit emotional and a bit deep, but I could die at any moment, and it's almost crushing, this weight of your own mortality and the awareness of it. And then I did struggle with it. I struggled with it a lot, actually, and then it kind of came good in the end. And you turn that into a positive, that, okay, you could die at any moment. It's a horrible thought, but so let's make every moment the best it can be.
Molly sounds like she would be an amazing addition to the Leadville family. Hopefully we'll see her there one day.
Yeah, I would love to run into her, and she has some... I would love to... Maybe we could just do laps around downtown Leadville with her. That would be good with me. I'd do 103 miles that way. She'd be perfect for it. I want to talk about Envy for a minute here, and I want to talk about what is one of their cheapest items, but nonetheless very important.
Yeah, when you use the word cheap in the same sentence as Envy, Hottie, you obviously don't mean poor quality. You're talking about price.
Exactly right. Last show, we talked about the new Foundation Series wheels that come in at $1,600 a pair. I'm talking way cheaper than that, though. Like $1,595 cheaper. Go to the Envy accessories page and please check out the valve core removal tool.
Yeah, I've got a nice valve core removal tool that I bought from Stan's, half a decade ago. But that's actually an Envy product that I have not got. I don't have an Envy valve core removal tool. So do I even need one?
You do. And you might need one on race day. See, Envy's valve core removal tool threads onto the valve stem, kind of like a valve cap, which means it's in the perfect spot should you need it. Say you get a partial flat where sealant eventually plugs the hole, you pump up the tire, but as you remove that pump or CO2, the valve core kind of comes loose and you start losing a little bit of air. Well, you just grab your Envy, kind of the valve cap, flip it over, and on the other end, you can use it as a valve core tool to snug up that loose core, and you're good to go.
Oh, that is so clever. So no scrounging around in your seat back or in your jersey pocket looking for that tiny little lifesaver there. It's right there where you actually need it. That's brilliant.
You learn fast, Fatty. And better yet, your $5 gets you a pair of them so you can be all matchy-matchy with a valve core removal tool on each valve stem.
Oh, that's important to me. So you can learn about Envy's wheels, their components, their accessories, which seem like they're all just made with the Leadville racer in mind and can handle anything else that you are doing as well. Go to enve.com. Let's wrap up Season 3, Episode 6 of the Leadville Podcast, presented by Floyd's of Leadville. If you like our show, go give it a 5-star rating and a review over at Apple Podcasts, and be sure to share it with your other cycling friends. Just do it remotely, okay? Support our sponsors. Let them know you appreciate the way they make this show possible.
Meanwhile, if you have ideas or questions for us, head to the Leadville100podcast.com comment section and get in touch. That's also where you can find a link to our Slack workspace and jump into our never-ending Leadville conversation.
I am there like all the time. It's seriously, go there right now, say hi to me, I will say hi back. Unless it's after like 9 p.m. Follow me on Twitter also. I'm not there as often, but I am there a lot. I am at Fat Cyclist. You can also find Hottie at Michael Houghton, and you can find us on Facebook in the Leadville 100 Mountain Bike Participants Group. Also, just one more time, check out our kit. It is at bit.ly, that is ly/Leadville Kit. Buy a jersey or a t-shirt, support our show.
Good luck in your training now. Thanks for listening, and we will see you at the starting line.